Hello and welcome back to my channel. It has been, it's been a long time since I was able to put out an episode. We had another record-breaking summer here in Phoenix, or Satan's Attic as I like to call it. We had 100 days where it was consistently over 110 degrees. It was just brutal and it really sucked for this. So had to take a minute on this project, had to step away from it. Had a little bit of fun, did some traveling, got to work on some other really kick-ass projects. But now I am back to finish up Project Rising Sun. So we are going to pick up today where I left off, and I'm going to kind of backtrack just to get everybody up to speed. If this is your first time tuning in, thanks for tuning in. If you've been following the build, thank you for following the build. Sorry it's been so long, but here we go. So last time we were here, I was working on laying up these panels. I did the outside of the panel here, and then I was able to lay up the inside of the panel. All the panels have had the inside and the outside laid up. What I'm actually going to be getting into today is blending these ports right here. Now, this is like an ultra critical part of this design for me. If these ports do not come out right, this design sucks. So this has been one of those situations where I've kind of been like, hey, do I want to force the issue with the heat, or does it make sense to wait till, the weather breaks? It's winter. Obviously, I waited. So today we're going to get into the layup process here. And this is a very intricate part. Like I said, this is going to blend the winglets, the black plastic winglets that I absolutely despise, into my body. And it's going to be done in such a way that it transitions smoothly so that they just simply disappear. Now, I've said this many times that I have seen other people throughout the industry try and hide the winglets, try and accentuate the winglets, do add-ons, whatever. The concept for this build was to create something in my mind that I felt that Toyota could have potentially put out on their own as a wide body. So knowing that premise, I want to simply make these winglets integrate into my wide body design, which again, this part is just key for that element. So we're going to get up into the layup today. I'm going to explain how I'm doing everything. If you're not familiar with my process here, I like to talk about it and I like to actually show the layup. So again, if this is your first time tuning in, make sure you stick around because that's what I'm going to be getting into right now. So to get started, I'm just going to explain what I did on the front end first, and then I will explain my template and do the layup on the back end. The back end pieces are a lot more intricate. I thought it would be better for explaining and demonstration purposes to do the back end, so I just went ahead and did the front first, and I'll explain what I did. So these ports will also tie into this inside fender arch here, or this little internal lip that I made. The reason I did that is because the number one thing that just kind of really gets under my skin is when I see these aftermarket body kits, and it's not so much the kit doesn't look good or it's installed improperly or whatever. Most people do not take their time when they're making their cuts to finish off the inside. So when you're walking around at a car show, you see inside someone's fender and it looks like someone took a cutoff wheel, just cut it all up, didn't even bother to paint the, the exposed metal. None of that is taken care of. This lip right here covers everything that I've cut so that when you look into this thing, it is actually going to look like it was manufactured this way from Toyota. That's the idea. I originally made these things paper thin, and I had a lot of comments about structurally it would just, as soon as a rock's going to hit it, it's just going to fly apart. Well, yeah, duh. It's like paper thin, and I've said it numerous times. It was only to retain shape. It wasn't structure. It wasn't supposed to be stout. It was just get me the shape that I needed that I could move forward. So now we're in the process of actually making this stronger. So that section blends my port, which covers winglets. Now this is behind the front wheel. There's actually not a winglet here. And let me back that up. There's not an OEM winglet, black winglet that I have to cover. This is the new winglet. That's a different situation. To get this started, I had to first cover all this in fiberglass and also down in here. From there, I was able to blend this section, wrap it up over this edge, and come around on this inside lip here. Now that's going to give the appearance that this is one flowing piece, so that after everything is sanded and all the body work is done, when you look at this, you're not going to be able to tell like, hey, this was separated here or down here or whatever. It's all going to just blend together. That's what we're going to be doing on the back end today. It's going to be an interesting layup, so we're just going to get into that next. I'll set this aside and I'll pull over my back piece. Actually, let me back that up. I'm going to throw some pictures up right now of what this looked like before I started the fiberglass process and what it looks like now. So we'll throw those up right now for you to see. So you can see in this area here and in this area down here, I had to do a lot of notching to make that lip fit. That lip was bonded with a epoxy. And while the epoxy itself is a great bonder, I'm not relying strictly on that epoxy to bond everything together, which is why I overlaid everything in fiberglass. So now this is, really strong. The epoxy was simply there to hold it in place and keep it, secure until I could get to this step. So this section is really good. I'm going to throw this away now. We'll get to the X piece. And this is what we're going to be working with today. And you can see there's a lot to do. We have sections in here. I'm trying to show everything as good as I can on camera. Might not be able to get it. This top section is going to have to be covered in fiberglass, but there is also some offsets in here that I have to account for. This section right here, there is a massive offset down in this corner as compared to the top. This is actually a replica of that winglet. I laid up fiberglass to make basically a replica of that, a skin, if you will. That will all get blended together. So again, when you look at this thing after it's installed, this section will blend right into that lip right here. So when you look at the body kit after it's bonded, you will see the rear fascia and where the winglet is supposed to be will just seamlessly blend into here and make this transition. To get started, I had to create some templates, and we'll go over those right now. This is kind of an interesting layup for me because, like I said, with all the different varying offsets and thicknesses, I had to do a lot of figuring with my fiberglass. And I've had a lot of people make comments about my fiberglass being really clean. They want to know how I do it. So I'm going to get into all that right now. First thing was first, this upper section right in here, there's two major points that had to be figured out. The first one is really kind of countersunk in deep. So I made a little template like this. And that basically, if I hold this in place, I don't know if you can see the tape, hopefully you can. That was the original piece that I made. That was these little guys right here. And I determined I needed 2 layers or 4 ounces. This is 2-ounce mat that I'm using to sit in this area right here to bring this surface and this surface basically flush with each other. So these will sit in here essentially just like that. And you can see it pretty much already leveled it out. The next thing was, okay, now that I got everything leveled out, I have to do this all over again. So I made another template that spanned the entire piece, just like that. So that is these little guys right here. Again, I'm doing 4 ounces on almost everything. There will be additional glass that has to be laid. Now, internal, external, you know, that's a lot of glass. Some guys like 4, some guys like 6, some guys like 8 ounces. I mean, it is kind of up to you how many ounces of material you want to lay up. For me, it's knowing that I have to add additional layers. 4 is all I need right now. So after that, I was able to get these pieces all nice and cut. And you can see how they just lay in place really neat. Not a very difficult process there, but that's these 2 templates. The next section that's really tricky is right here. Like I said, there was this massive offset down in this corner. And what I really determined was that there are 2 good ways to do this. Number 1, you can come up with a base layer of fiberglass and then stack on top of that and build up the surface. Now, I've done it both ways where I've actually stacked and then laid a final layer over top of that. Over the years, what I have found is if you can lay a base layer and then you can stack on top of that base layer, it rolls out much nicer. Only because the way I tear my fiberglass, you can actually, with the torn edges, you can blend a lot easier. Whereas if I had all these stacked up and I didn't roll it out and then I laid a final layer over everything, by the time you get back with a roller, it kind of makes humps and waves, not as forgiving in the way of rolling it out and making it a nice flat surface. So we're going to start with a base layer. That's what I did with this template. Now this template's kind of interesting, and I'll explain it further because I have ×4, ×3, ×2. And that is how many layers of 2-ounce mat I have to add in these areas to make it flush with this surface right here. My handy assistant. Thank you. So for this, we are going to start with this guy. This was my template. This was my overall template, just to fit in here like this. And while I was making this template, I realized that there was a small section in here that I could not quite get with the other 2 pieces that I made. So by adding this this base material here, like so, I've now covered that gap. So when I put these pieces in, everything is actually covered. It will be blended nice and well. So the other thing that I want to talk about is on my template here. And I have some straight lines, and I will highlight these lines just because it'll be a little bit easier to see. Probably should have done this ahead of time, but you know, I do things on the fly. So I took this template, this basic shape, and I divided it up into areas that I determined this is how many layers of that mat I needed, like I said, to make it flush with this surface. This upper portion needed the base layer plus 1 layer. This one right here needed the base layer plus 2. Obviously this one, base layer plus 3, gives us the 2, 3, and the 4 that I have written down. Hope that makes sense to you. Makes sense to me. So now the cool thing the way I do these templates is I also use this to determine my rip line. When I am blending fiberglass, and I've said this repeatedly, and I'll say it again just because it's been a while, I do not cut. I tear my fiberglass. It just allows things to blend easier. So when we're talking about taking 2 pieces of fiberglass like this, if I were to take these 2, for example, I can overlay them like this, and that line disappears. It's not a visible seam anymore. It just disappears. So if I were to do the same thing, we'll just use the hard edges. If I would take this hard edge and put it on here, right there, there's a very hard transition line that you can see, and I can actually feel it. So by tearing your fiberglass, you're actually going to get rid of all those seams, allow you to blend everything and look like it was all one piece. So I have 3 of these guys here, 2 of these guys, and like I said, that's basically, let's see if I can hold this up with my template like this. You can see that's my first layer. This better? All right. I was just told that I was too close, so I had to back up. So you can see here's my first piece. This is my second and third here. And this will blend here. So this is basically how I did my template. This is how I determined where I was going to make my tears in my fabric. This is how I'm doing everything so that when I roll over all of this stuff, it will just blend out. After we get all that stuff done, we are going to do one final layer that will actually go over everything just like this, and then this will wrap around that edge. And this is what I did on the front end. The front end pieces, I wrapped that fiberglass over that edge, and that's what's going to actually add a little bit more strength to that lip, and it will make everything look like it just flows all together. And you can see if I just lay my fiberglass over like that, you know, obviously it's not transparent because it's not wet out, but you can see how that this winglet will just blend right into that port. So again, this is like, I can't even stress this enough. This is a crazy critical area in the design for me. This stuff not coming out right just ruins everything, which is exactly why I decided to wait until the weather was better. I didn't want to get into a situation where I was this far along in the process and screw the pooch. Just didn't want to do it. So that's basically what we've got here with our fiberglass. There's not a whole lot more to explain in the how I came up with all this stuff. So I guess the next thing we're going to do is just actually do the layup. Again, I'm going to have to be wearing a respirator. So if there's anything like pertinent information that I need to say, I will just voice over. But, you know, pretty much at this point, it's just going to be straight layup. So sit back, relax, grab some popcorn, whatever you do, and I'm going to get some fiberglass done. All right, so that in a nutshell is what it took to blend out the port to make these winglets go away. Now, I'm going to continue that process and have every single one of the ports done before we move on to the next round, which will be to encase the bottom side of the new winglet. That will be what we do in our next episode. The following episode will be to finish off covering the rest of the round bar. So at that point, all of the major fiberglass work will essentially be done. It's going to be a little bit of like, the inside fender arch, that's going to have to be fiberglass. But after that, we're on to bonding everything permanently and starting on the bodywork. So although there was this massive gap of time in between, for me, it was just a calculated risk and I felt more comfortable doing it this way. So that's essentially, where we are at right now. So make sure you get check back. I'm going to try and put these videos out consistently again like I had been. I don't know exactly how it's going to work out, if it's going to be every week, every 2 weeks. I'm just going to keep rolling with it until I get this thing completed. So, like always, thank you for watching, and we will catch you next time.